Just scoot over.
Sure.
I don't have, well, close there.
I do have a little bit.
Oh, thank you.
Not tremendously bad, just a little bit bad.
No.
Okay, we are live on Facebook and we are recording, so whenever you're ready, Mark.
Yeah.
So she said, whenever you're ready.
Oh, I would thought you was, are you ready, Julie?
Yeah.
We need, well, 1, 2, 3, 4. We
Right,
got,
we've got, where's quorum is, well, unless Marilyn's here, unless you want to wait a few minutes for Marilyn.
I think we should just get started. Marilyn, I mean, it'll take us a while to get through the preliminaries and then she'll join us when she's here. Okay?
Mhm.
Good. Okay, so this is the Village of Sherwood Hills meeting of the Finance Committee. Today is Monday, March 23rd. The time is 5:32. Julie, will you call the roll?
Yes. Mark Lederer,
Here?
Gloria Beach,
Here.
John Cody,
Here.
Liz Heiner,
Here.
Marilyn Delvin,
Here.
and Dietmar Basooner and Kate Crowley both said that they would not be available this evening.
They're excused absence. All right. Julie, has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes, they have.
Excellent. Okay. First order of business is the minutes of January 26th that was in the meeting packet that was posted on the web.
With, I haven't been able to review. In fact, I didn't see them on the Facebook. Julie, did I just miss them? Is this meeting still on the Facebook?
Or on Facebook or on the web.
The January 26th meeting, is it still on
No,
Facebook?
Facebook automatically deletes those after 30 days.
I thought it was something like that, but we still have a recording.
Yes, we do.
Yes, and I said a lot more than the minutes reflect about questions I had about tasks and duties, and at the same time, I didn't have a chance to see if what I actually said reflects what I think I said. And I do not want to take the time of this committee or bother Julie without listening and then making a proposal. So I would like them to be held over to the next meeting.
Any objection to the committee members, Julie, Gloria?
I'd like to add to that because there was on item number 6, discussion and possible action, the summary of the minutes as pertains to the donation and closing strategy, specifically about TID 4 closing early, I think is misrepresenting, not intentionally, but misrepresenting the actual body of that meeting. There were a couple typos. Also, when you put in also in attendance, do you purposely not include Brian Mooney?
He wasn't at that.
He wasn't at that
he
meeting.
wasn't
That's
there.
right. I wondered about that. Okay. So there were a couple typos. He was in Florida. Were you on vacay? Right. So there were a couple typos that I wanted to correct. I can do that offline. But more the substance of it, the sentence, they had compiled a list of next steps, they being Beach and Crowley, compiled a list of next steps in pursuing the possibility of closing TID 4 early or setting up donations between TIDs. The meat of that strategy was actually to close TID 3 early.
Okay.
And this makes me understand more about why we're pursuing so much TID 4. So I agree, let's table this. I think Kate Crowley could weigh in on this too, in that way.
Well, and maybe you could just send the, or
I can send you a link to the recording.
Yes.
Could you send it to me too?
Well,
Okay.
you have enough to do. I will send it to everybody who wants.
It's fine, it's one
Okay,
email.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
And I'll send you a little thing on the typos.
Yeah, yes, if typos that we don't have. to
Yeah,
go
just
into.
send that to you. Yeah.
Thank you. It was Saturday night. I was really tired.
You, of course. I made a
Sean and
mistake.
Liz, you have no objection to deferring the meeting minutes to the next meeting? Very
Thank
good.
you.
So we will do that. They will be deferred to the next meeting. Moving on then to public. Lori.
Before we go to public comments, I looked at the board meeting package where normally there's roll call, then approval of the agenda. I would suggest that we reorganize this agenda a little bit such that the discussion, I think it's item 7 regarding referendum plan, be reversed with item 8. I think 8, discussion of proposed analysis of overtime, should go before discussion of a referendum.
I have no objection to that.
I'll agree to that as long as we don't keep the meeting going too long, because I want to make sure we get to the referendum issue tonight. So just so that discussion doesn't drag on. We'll
What's our
give it a shot.
deadline on the meeting? I didn't know we had a deadline.
Well, we don't, but yeah, I have a bedtime I've got to. So,
10 o'clock.
all right, yeah, there you go.
All right.
I've done too many late nights. Let's move on then to public comments. Does anyone in the audience wish to make a public comment? Sam, go ahead.
Caroline Mahaney briefly. My public comment is that I read Kate's list of things that we need to do. And I'd like to see that actually detailed out as an agenda item that the board takes on piece by piece and responds to each one. So that we are sure that we're actually doing the due diligence that has been laid out, including looking at cost savings. And I love the idea that Kate said, we'll go to the different committees and actually talk to those committees and say, what can we do? And not just leave this responsibility on the shoulders of one person. And she seemed to be fine about going to many committee meetings. We have got to build that base. If you think you're going to do a referendum, you're going to have to make sure that you can show concrete evidence that we have done the due diligence. And I hate to say that because that harkens back to something else that I don't want to think about. But we really do. We need to look at all the TIDs. Which one should we be retiring? Which one shouldn't we be retiring? And then this whole thing about overtime and staff, that's got to be looked at. That not only is, I figured out it was $56,000 in overtime alone, according to the work that you did. I just looked at all the 12,000s and the 10,000.
Those were made up numbers.
I know they're made up
Okay.
numbers. The point is, they're probably, yes, those are made up numbers, but that is probably a reality. And we have got to be mindful of what we are doing to staff. When we are asking them to work overtime, that they get so many hours overtime. I know this is true in the police department, that they are getting so many hours in overtime that they're maybe exceeding other people who are professional staff. That's bad for morale. But most of my point is, months ago, I asked that we do two things. I said, stop hiring, put a freeze on hiring till we know what we can afford and what we can't. And the second one is manage your overtime costs. And that means giving responsibility and empowerment to your department heads to actually say, we can't do that because we can't do overtime. And that's a sad thing to do, but it is endemic in every bureaucracy that I've ever been in, that you have to learn to do more with less. And that's not a bad thing to do. In fact, there's whole consulting firms out there that will tell you how to do that. So I think that we have to be serious about this. We cannot continue to just accept the fact that this is a rich village. And so we're just going to keep asking the village to come up and pay for staff.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to make a comment? Seeing none, is there anyone online, Julie, that wishes to make a comment?
One guest online, and she does not have her hand up.
Okay. All right, then let's close out the public comment period and move on to the part of the meeting now. Discussion, possible action on early TID closure. So just to refresh the memory of the committee, at the last meeting of the committee, the committee make a recommendation that the board retain and ask questions of both Van der Waals and Ellers with respect to some outstanding questions that we have about TID closure. And following that, there was a conference call in which I participated. I think Brian, Julie, Kate Crowley was on the call, as well as Sonia from Van der Waal and Ariana from Ellers. And we discussed some of the questions we had about early TID closure. And thereafter, Ariana produced a document which appeared in the board packet, and I included it in our packet as well. I believe it begins on page 21 of our packet, where Ariana modeled some of the questions that we had asked of her. Let me just turn to that page right now. Okay.
It's on page
So,
20.
Yeah, it's a little earlier, isn't it? It's actually on page 21?
21.
21, okay. So it's 21 of the packet, and it is a email from Ariana to Brian. And it goes through the issues associated with modeling an early closure of TID 3, in part funded by an early closure of TID 4. So TID 4 was to be closed in 2027, and then there would be a donation made to TID 3 to accelerate its closure by 1 year, I believe 1 year from 2030 to 2029. And then she included a table that had the initial projected deficits based on the work, the early financial model work that they did. It showed we were in deficit beginning in 27. There was an operating deficit of about $93,000. And then it increased in the following years to 148,000, 260,000, and then $378,000 in 2030. And what Ariana did is she incorporated in the financial model these early closures and the donations. And as a result of that, she was able to project what the deficits would be based on the closures. So the deficit in 2027 didn't change. Just let me finish. I'll be done with this in a moment. So in 2027, the deficit was originally projected about $93,000. Since the closure of TID 4 did not occur until 27, and the tax impact wouldn't occur till 2028, that deficit was unchanged. But beginning in 28 and 29 and 30, there were reductions to the projected deficit, but a far cry from actually closing the deficits. So in 2028, the original deficit was projected 148,000. Following the TID closures as Ariana modeled them, it brought it down to 118,000. So still a substantial deficit. And the same was true in subsequent years. In 29, the deficit was projected originally at 260,000. It was reduced to 230,000. And in 2030, it was projected at 378 down to 250. So Ariana concluded based on the early modeling that while early closure was helpful and made a significant difference, there was still a very large gap operating deficit in future years. So that kind of left us where we are today. Gloria.
Thank you. The reason I interjected was not to be rude. So I apologize for that.
Yep.
The reason I interjected was because Liz is writing down the numbers that you just recited. People are paying attention to the numbers you just recited. And I don't believe those are correct numbers. The reason I don't think they're correct numbers is I don't think Van der Waal has updated the numbers that Ehlers used to create this model. Ehlers used created this model based on numbers that do not have the updated MMSD tax rates. Those tax rates were not updated last year. We had asked for the very first thing to be done is to update the numbers. So it's no fault of Ehlers, it's no fault of Vanderwall, but really you can't trust an output when you can't trust the input.
I don't know, and I don't know, Brian, do you know whether, thinking about the issue of updates, as I recall, there were some errors in the original 2024 annual report that Ehlers produced, the spreadsheets that appear at the back of the report and the projections. Sonia went back and made revisions to that, I believe, and
Sonia with-
reissued the
Sonia's with Ehlers.
2024 report.
She's with Vanderwall. Okay, so
Yeah.
she did update the numbers, the tax rates?
She did a revision to it. I can't remember what month that was.
Because that would have had to have happened in December or January.
She did provide us with updated, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't tell you exactly what was updated. She did provide us with updated spreadsheet after it was presented.
But if it,
Oh.
unless it has those updated tax rates, they're not updated enough to have had Ehlers use those as a foundation to generate this. And
What happens with the tax rates? When the
Well-
tax close, that's based on the increment value, not the tax rate.
well,
I think Elders might still be in the buffer.
but the increment is based on the tax rates. So the amount of surplus is based on the tax rates.
No. Kind of. I need Ariana to explain this for, it's based on the so what we can add to our, the problem is, it's not so much what's in the TID. Because when we close a TID, what's left. does
That's
get
the
distributed.
surplus.
It's a one-time surplus, so we do get a portion of that, but then all the other entities get those as well. But as far as increasing our levy for the operating budget, that is based on that's based on the value of the property, and then we
Right.
only get 50% of that.
So
increased
I
value.
understand how that works.
Right.
I understand. I've been explaining this to a lot of people. You have the equalized, it's not that complicated, actually. You have the equalized value of the TID. You divide that by the equalized value of the village. You create you calculate a percentage. Because this is a TID that was created prior to 2024, you divide that in half. If it's after 2024, you can take 90% and then 10%. But because it's 2024, you divide that percentage in half. And that's how we derive 29,750. But my position is that we need to make sure that the equalized value numbers that were used to create this number are actually correct. And if nobody in this room can say with assurance that they are correct, I would suggest we move on.
But the equalized value is not affected by the tax rate. The equalized value is what we get from the state.
Are the numbers from Vanderwall correct right now?
As far as I know, yes.
Okay, because they
But the
were
tax
not,
rate
they
is
were not
different.
correct last year.
The tax rate, you're talking increment, that's not the equalized value.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
But
What I'm looking at here is like, I think what she is modeling, from my understanding of our meeting, is how much more will be coming in tax levy.
Right, I understand that.
Okay. And that's only based on the equalized value.
Right, and is the equalized value correct?
That's based on what we get from the state, so yes. That's
For the
plugged
TID.
in. The state of Wisconsin sets equalized value.
For the whole village
Yes, for every
And-
property,
and for the TID as well?
correct.
Okay,
Mhm.
and so all these numbers are correct? Because my understanding from that March 3rd meeting, and I wasn't there, and the rest of the finance committee was not there. So this is all based on,
Kate was there.
right, so what I was going to say is that this is all third-hand information and reading through emails that were not shared with the entire finance committee and are not available to the public unless they do an ORR. But my understanding is that the numbers that Ehlers was using were based on projections that Kate and I were using that were not updated from Vanderwall.
Well, I think they were based on Vanderwall's work, not
Right,
on
but
your
I'm saying that it
projections.
wasn't updated.
Right. It wasn't
Let's be
updated. and- Anyway.
circular conversation here.
So, I mean, we can go back to Ariana and confirm that she incorporated, to the extent that was appropriate, the MMSD's tax rates in the calculations, but I'm not sure that it actually had an impact. But we can go back and check on that. But I think the issue before the committee now is what appears on page 15 of the packet, which is the TIF annual reporting services. So the question is someone's going to have to do TIF projections on our behalf to figure out what the surplus is, whether the TIDs can make the donations, and what the impact on the overall village financial situation is. Vanderwall, Sonia has already said she does not want to, Vanderwall does not make such projections. They don't necessarily, that's not the business they're in.
That's kind of the point I just made.
Exactly. So, but Ellers is in that business.
Right.
And Ellers has made a proposal to us
Yes.
to do those calculations. And that's what's in front of the committee tonight. Okay, that's on page 15.
So my question about this, please, is when did Brian or Julie, this
You know,
appendix?
quickly, hold a minute, I printed out the packet, but my printout isn't numbered, so I've been scrambling. Liz and I've been scrambling to see.
Appendix B is what you're talking
It's
about.
called,
It's
there
called
there are
TIF.
two documents called Appendix B, but the one that we're talking about at the moment is on page 15 of the packet, and it's labeled TIF Annual Reporting Services.
Okay.
So these are services that are currently provided in general by Vanderwall. Okay, they produce the annual report of the TIDs, the 2024 reports and the earlier reports. And at the back of their reports, they produce projections for each of the TIDs. But Sonia has reported back to us that for the purposes of doing calculations, like determining early closures and the like, that's not what those projections were intended to do. And they're not interested in updating those projections for early closure. If we want to model what an early closure looks like, Vanderwall is not the party to do it, but Ellers can do it. And Ellers has provided a proposal to do those calculations, and not only to do the calculations of the early closures, but to basically replace all the responsibilities that Vanderwall had previously or currently has in terms of producing the annual report, presenting it to the Joint Review Board, and so on and so forth. So that's the proposal that's before us. Gloria.
So that's the point I just made, with Vanderwall not being in a position to create the numbers necessary to project the closures. That's exactly the point I just made. TID 4, when you're telling the public that closing TID 4 will render 30,000 for us, I don't know that we can really accurately say that. I don't think we're in a position at this point to draw conclusions. I am asking the question, when did this TIF annual reporting services Appendix B, when did we receive this?
This proposal,
This was.
very recently.
Last week, I would say.
Last week.
Yeah.
So today's the 23rd, so you think you got it?
Possibly
16th?
Friday.
Oh, the 20th?
So
Okay.
Late Thursday.
Because I was just curious why this hadn't gone in front of the board, because that was the,
We didn't have.
so that answers the question. Thank you. So with this Appendix B, having looked it over, I think this is great. I think this is just really great. But looking at your email, Mark,
Yep.
I want to say it was February 17th, where, no, it wasn't February 17th. It was January 28th. So we met on January 26th, and you wrote an email January 28th directing staff to set up meetings with consultants. And you outlined the steps that should be taken, and they were actually contrary to the steps that this finance committee had just agreed on 2 days prior. And
I
so
don't recall
and-
that, and without having the memo in front of me.
that's right
Not
in the,
gonna
it's right in the finance
concede any
package,
of that.
right there in the finance package. In today's
What
finance
page are we
package,
talking about?
it would be page 11 of 65. It is an email from you to Brian Mooney with Julie Fitzgerald on copy. And in my opinion, step one consists of the following. And you go through and you outline what steps you want to see the consultants take, which are actually contrary to the steps that this committee approved on January 26th, based on discussion of the January 8th memo and the email that you sent as response to the January 8th memo. I'm just going to make that point. But what distressed me the most reading this memo, Mark,
Yeah,
was that, of course, this makes sense now, why the consultants were so focused on how do we close TID 4? Because that's not the goal. The goal is TID 3. The goal was always to look at a donation strategy to TID 3 from TID 4, from TID 5. Brian Mooney, thank you for contacting the village attorney to get an opinion on the difference between affordable housing and low cost housing. Thank you for that. I think we need to go to the board and have the board, just like the attorney recommended, have the board in agreement that we agree as a board that those are the same, meaning substantially the same thing. And then we need to have the joint review board meet so that the other taxing authorities can also see the same information and agree to the same information. But I would like to please pursue the strategy that was outlined in January, not the strategy that you outlined, Mark, but the strategy that the Finance Committee outlined.
well, my recollection is that part of the strategy was to close TID 4 because TID 4 was the only TID that had a relatively early closure. TID 3 was not slated to close until 2031.
Correct.
So we're not moving TID 3 from 2031 to 2027.
No, we're not, but we don't know how much earlier we could move it because we haven't explored TID 4 with correct numbers. We haven't explored TID 5 at all. I'm sorry you're unhappy with me for pointing this out, but it's in the minutes, it's in the record, it is in the board, the finance package for January, and it's in today's package.
Well, let's see if we can agree on a few things. The first thing is, do we want to do we want to recommend to the board to retain Ehlers to take over the responsibility of Vanderwall to do the TID reporting, including the projections of cash flows going forward? I think that needs to be done in any case, right? Does it not?
I would agree with that, and I would make the motion that we accept this proposal for Ehlers to take on entirely the TID financing for TID 3, TID 4, TID 5, as well as preparing for the joint review boards, as well as staffing the joint review boards. I looked at the money for this. It makes good sense, but with the caveat that you're not just telling them what to do without anyone else's input.
I'm not telling them what to do. That's just not happening.
That's a matter of
But
record.
let's, I don't want to take a lot of committee time.
Well, I don't want to be
Rehash
gaslit.
what
It's
the
right here.
record is.
There is
You
actually.
and I have very
It is
strong disagreements
Well,
about.
it is on page 11 of 65, and you wrote it.
I just think it's, yes, I wrote that memo. But I disagree with you that that memo is inconsistent with the conversations that the committee had up to that point in time.
There is a memo that is also a part of the record.
That's fine. But I don't think we want to take up committee time hashing that out.
Well,
But
I'm not
once
sure
it-
what time we would hash it out then, because if you're going to go off rails and start doing your own thing without approval from the board, and without approval from the committee, when is the right time?
I've never gone off the rails and done anything.
Okay.
So do you want a motion that we accept?
Yes, what I'd like to do is get back to business here. And if you'd like to make the motion, Liz, that'd be great, or I'll go ahead and
Do
make
you
the
want-
motion and see if it's
Sure,
going to be
make the motion.
seconded.
I will make the motion that we accept the proposal as outlined by Ehlers to have them manage our TID tax incremental districts in the cost, also the, this is it written out anywhere that I can read that?
I think what we're doing is, it's not this committee that's accepting this proposal.
Oh,
We
then
don't have that
I would-
authority.
would-
So
I
what we're
would
doing is we're
propose that the
recommending
board do
that the
that.
board accept the TID annual reporting service proposal from Ellers.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so,
For all
Ron,
three,
Julie?
all three of the tax incremental districts.
Me one more time, it's not what was. in the
yeah,
packet.
so.
What is in the package, Julie?
Well, what I had pre-typed, and I don't know if this, I don't know where I got this, I did this earlier today, it said to recommend to the board approval of the expenditure of up to blank dollars to pay consulting costs for advanced planning to close TIDs early. So that's not what we're doing.
See that, okay, so I actually
That was
wrote,
that was a motion at a previous meeting and the
Oh, I
board
apologize.
did approve that already at the
Oh,
last
that's
board
right.
meeting. So right now, the motion, I think,
Accept.
here's, I've heard it, I've already written it out. The motion to approve the expenditure of up to $5,500 to pay consulting costs for advanced planning to explore donation strategies from TID 4 and TID 5 to TID 3, with primary objective being to possibly close TID 3 early. Resulting consulting costs would be funded by the respective TIDs. Joint Review Board would, I can send it to you too.
Thank you.
Joint Review, because I have it written out, so I'm reading it. Joint Review Board would be consulted regarding agreement on low-cost housing designation being in alignment with affordable housing designation. And do you want me to email that to you right now?
I have a couple questions.
Please.
If it's all right with everybody. So it was my understanding that we don't need to include the joint review board on this, correct? I believe we do not have to for
We don't.
this, so I don't think we need to consult them for that part.
Okay. So I can
Okay.
shorten it up. I can withdraw my
Because
motion
I
and
don't
I'll
want
shorten
the
it
board
up.
To demand that and then it.
That's fine. So
Yeah.
I'll withdraw the motion. I'll shorten it up. So, and I'm having trouble
And
saying,
so what you're quoting, is this what is,
I
okay, so
modified,
the
I
proposal-
modified what was written down here.
okay, but do we just want to approve the proposal as presented? Because that's a yearly fee, it's not a one-time fee from the proposal, correct?
But you've put a cap of up to, and so,
That was my mistake because that was something that Mark had written as. it was still
I think what we
over-
really want to do here is we just want to recommend, it's very simple. I think what we want to do now is just to recommend to the board approval of the TIF annual reporting services proposal from Ellers as presented. Okay, it's not the issue of the strategy and who's going to give them direction and so on.
I agree.
That's down the road. Right now, all we're looking for is for the board to approve this service.
Are you making that
Okay.
motion?
So yeah, so Julia, let me try it again. So
Okay.
motion, okay, the motion to recommend board approval of the TIF annual reporting services proposal as presented
Reporting proposal from Ellers.
Yes,
from Ellers as presented.
and I would second that.
Recommend board approval of the TIF annual reporting proposal from Ellers as presented.
Let me try that again.
Did I send up? I'm
So-
sorry.
It's recommend board approval of the TIF annual reporting services proposal from Ellers as presented. Okay?
And it's, could I just ask, can we have, Ellers made it clear it was for $5,500. Can we include that in our motion so we know what these things cost and there's.
I will say one thing about that. Ayler's also in their proposal, they did say that if they need to, if they are receiving a cash flow, it's one cost versus if they have to create the cash flow, it's another cost. And it's unclear to me whether or not they will have to create a new cash flow.
And there's also a section in that proposal that talks about, setting up the meeting, which we have always done, so we may not have to pay 500 for that.
For the JRB.
The Joint Review Board always.
I
That might
don't
not
know.
be, so I don't know if we have an exact dollar amount. I think we still have to pick and choose what we're going to take out of there.
I hear you. I agree
Well,
with that.
well, I should wait. Well, but they're very clear here. They say, charge $4,500 for preparation of the supplemental reports, $1,500 per TID, $500 for JRB meeting coordination, $500 for JRB meeting attendance, for a total of $5,500. This assumes a single JRB meeting is held. I do not want to vote on an open-ended thing. When we deal with contractors, if they modify things, we have to approve them. If this is going to be more than what we authorize, well then the board can do what they want to do, but as a member of finance, I think we should be clear about why I would vote yes for this, because there's a ceiling of 5,500. Some of these consultants, suddenly they need modifications or they believe they have a blank check. All in good faith, I'm sure, but I will not vote yes if we do not take the words of the proposal as to the cost. And again, they can come back and say, this is what we accomplished, which we agreed we would, but now there's a problem, we need more. Well, we can understand if there's a problem, let them come back and see if we agree.
Well, first of all, just to be clear, I made the motion, Gloria, you second the motion, so now we're in discussion.
Mhm.
Any other comments with respect to the motion? Hearing, seeing none. Let's go ahead and vote on the motion.
Well, would you consider an amendment to incorporate the cost concerns?
I think the contract as is actually satisfactory from my point of view. And the board will certainly discuss the contract. Ours is only a recommendation. This is going to go to the board. Board will have discussion on this contract as well. In the intervening time, since the board meeting isn't for 3 weeks out, there'll be plenty of time for the administration to have discussion with Ellers to clear up any issues of this nature and bring them to the attention of the board. So I just think we're better off recommending the contract as it stands and letting the process work its way through.
Do you have
That's my
thoughts?
position on it.
I tend to agree with Mark. I wouldn't tie everyone's hand on this one, but
I agree. As it's proposed, I think it's rational. I don't think that we're really setting ourselves up for just extra
Thousands of-
expenses out of it. Just the way it's proposed, I'm fine with agreeing to make a recommendation for what's outlined there. I think that we can get into a lot of details as far as contingencies put on expenses, but for the sake of this motion, I'm more than comfortable just making a recommendation to the board to go with what's being proposed.
My experience is consultants underbid. They put 5,500, I can rubber stamp it for that. And they were pretty adamant about what this money was for. I don't see any problem holding them to it. And that's what you do with contracts. And then if they want a modification, they come back. We've done that. We did that for years on the board.
I tend to agree. They did put down a firm number. They've obviously built some wiggle room into that to make sure that they're not running over for their own expenditures. So I tend to agree that there's not a problem with attaching a motion, an amendment to the motion, having this be the contract that's being approved, not to exceed 5,500.
Any other discussion?
And I would point out, Mark, you really did surprise the trustees, even Carol Barford. When you came back with Ellers, they thought it was a one-time deal and you said it was a service contract. And they said, that isn't what we thought it was. I mean, we have all these people running for election in part because the residents have an uncomfortable feeling about consultants. I think when I saw the 5,500, I thought, that doesn't look like a real number to me, but I could be wrong.
Any
What
further?
I'm just curious.
I just don't see how they can prepare supplemental reports for each one, just say, code 1,500 per. It seems low. I do not pretend to be an expert, but I've certainly dealt with enough professionals. And before you know it, you're running up the hourly fee.
It's not an hourly fee.
Yeah.
Well,
It
no,
more than-
whatever, no, it's a set, no, that's great.
It's a set fee.
Yes, and I just want to hold them to it and let them eat the difference. Rather than coming back and saying, well, it was a supplemental report, but then this happened, that happened, and this, you need it to understand the supplemental report, that'll be extra. I mean, and we cannot burden our staff.
Okay, just to move this along, I don't mind amending it to say not to exceed $5,500. Is that gonna I mean, I think no,
Is a contingency if there's just more than one JRB meeting?
yeah,
Is that really what they'll need? I apologize. I didn't.
that's what
section where
it
that was
says.
printed out, I don't have in front of me, but
But, you
that
know,
was my recollection. It just the only contingency.
it does
was
mean,
more.
it basically means that if they come back and
Yeah,
I think the probability is low.
I think the probability is low unless we give them bad data and then they have to redo everything, but
Objection to it's as presented, but also changes the motion necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, any contract that we enter into has to be administered. It's not like it's a blank
Right.
check. Somebody has to give them direction. And whether that's Brian as village administrator, whether that's the finance committee giving direction to Brian, whether it's the board giving direction to Brian, I think it's all going to work through Brian. Question is, who will be giving Brian guidance in this process? And that's where the bill could start to run up, because you're talking about if there were multiple scenarios, multiple cash flow scenarios for a given TID, then you could run up the cost pretty quickly. What they're proposing is a single scenario, a single forecast for each TID for a fixed cost. And as long as that's what we stick to, I think we're fine. If we start talking about, well, we'd like to see what it looks like under this scenario and under that scenario,
they've got.
then all of a sudden things can get out of hand. But that's something that has to be administered. And that has to be either clear direction from Brian, and Brian getting clear direction from either the board or the finance committee, depending on how the board wants this to work. So, but I don't think it's a contractual problem. I think it's an internal management issue, and we should leave it at that.
Mark, that assumes that we can ignore what's been going on the last 2 years. And that's total chaos among the governance board and a lack of direction to our administrators. So don't tell me to have faith in the process, because I don't. I think we have to control the costs. We have to demonstrate to the residents that we're doing that. And it's easier. This gives our administrator clear direction. This is, and then we see what they did and we look at it. Is this worth another dime of village money? I mean, I'm not sure, frankly. It's worth 5,500, but I'm with you on 5,500.
But you realize that that will just mean that every time any additional scenario needs to be run, and let's say this committee says, hey, we really should look at X. Well, we can't just tell Brian to go look at X. We'll have to make a recommendation to the board to spend an additional amount of money so that Brian can give direction to the consultant to produce that output. So you're adding in a lot of time.
The board has already rejected one of our proposals, so they can reject this one. I mean, obviously, the board will do what it'll do. You will give it your spin and they'll do what they'll do, but I am not, I mean, I won't repeat what I've already said.
But just taking that argument from the same perspective, the board, if we just pass this as presented, the board can add any additional contingencies, restrictions that they want to. If the board says this is fine, but we don't want to spend any more than $5,500 on it, they can say that.
I've watched that board in action and they have so many things. It's lucky. I do not have faith that the board will scrutinize this. This is what finance is for. And if finance votes and says we accept it, that'll give them the out they want. I mean, that isn't reassuring.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I think we should just vote on the motion. If the motion is voted down, we can entertain a new motion. And we'll just move this along, because I don't think this discussion is getting us any further. Gloria.
I have a question.
Yep.
And I think you should be able to answer the question. So easy question. Here it says 1,500 flat fee per TID.
Right.
Unless a cash flow model must be created.
Yep.
Are they going to have to create a cash flow model?
But that I don't know at the moment. When we originally contracted with others to develop the financial management plan, right, in which all these things were modeled. Okay? I think that the original instructions to Ellers at that time was to take the projections in the 2024 annual report and incorporate them as is in the financial model. Okay. Subsequently, have they actually created the model, or are they still operating on those original projections? That I don't know the answer to that. I think Ariana said at one point that they were going to create a separate, if you will, tab or page to model the TIDs, as opposed to just incorporating the projections of Van der Waal. But I don't know if that's happened thus far.
So
You know,
Julie, as finance director, probably is in the best position to answer this question.
I just have these are just my really rough notes that I took for myself at the meeting. But I do have a note that Ariana had said that in what she has, those numbers that we saw, she had included TID 3 and 4 closures, and that Ellers can do a cash flow for early TID closures, but there is an additional charge for that. So it's pretty much.
So it sounds like they don't have the cash flows
No,
modeled.
there, because that's.
Okay, so it sounds like we're not looking at $1,500 flat fee for TIDs.
Well, it's a $1,500 fee to produce the projections that have to go in the annual report, which is part of the state requirement, okay? But to the extent that we might want to model different circumstances,
That's-
yes, there would be additional fees.
I don't think that's
I
what
would
it
fully
says.
expect that, but that's not,
It's not what it says. It says existing cash flow model to update. And if a cash flow model must be created, the additional time required for that task may be billed hourly. So back to what Marilyn is saying, she's trying to contain our costs. Surely you can understand that going into an operational deficit.
Trying to
So,
understand.
right. And But also just to try to contain the costs. Put a little bit of,
Well, I want transparency.
yeah,
Right.
But do we need these reports? I mean, we
Yes,
need
yes,
these reports.
yes.
These are banned.
So if we
State.
need them, and are we gonna need them with, do we absolutely need them with
Yeah.
cash flow?
the cash flow is going to be helpful if we're understanding this TID strategy. And yes, we do need the cash flows.
So even if, and Marilyn herself said this sounded low, right?
Yeah,
A low bid.
How,
But-
so are we
And
willing
no one
to?
out, the other people can't do it. We do
Right.
not have the expertise. I do
Correct.
not, let
We
me,
don't.
we do not in this committee have the expertise to do it. So we need somebody to do it, right?
We do.
And we're gonna have to pay
And
them.
Ehlers is really
do
quite
it.
good. Ehlers is really quite good. I mean, Ehlers, if you,
is it unreasonable to ask for transparency?
No, it's not at all.
in a proposal?
I don't think it is.
Well, I don't think it is either.
No, I don't think it is.
People can do it.
But I just want to put out there that it doesn't even seem clear that it will be a flat fee.
As I said, to the extent that they have to model alternative universes beyond just a simple cash flow, no early termination, no nothing special. They've given us a flat fixed fee for that, but they're saying, hey, if you want to model a different environment, it's going to cost you.
That's not what they're actually saying.
That's not what they're saying, but that's the reality of
But
it.
that's not what they're saying. What they're saying is if you have a cash flow model that you can give to us that we can update, it will be $1,500. If you don't have something already ready to go that we just need to tweak and update, it will be an hourly because we're going to have to create that. That is what they're saying.
They created a, if you will, I don't know if you would call it a model or not, but there is a portion of their financial management plan includes the TIDs. Okay, they were explicitly included in the financial model contract. So there's a page, if you will, a tab and a spreadsheet for each of the TIDs. It's a question of what happens on that page. Okay, is it just
Is that a cash flow?
numbers
Yeah.
taken from Vanderwall and incorporated in their model, or is it actually interact with the other portions of the model, that is the village operations and the like? So we don't have the answer to that.
But that's also not what this proposal says, Mark. I'm sorry you're frustrated, but it's not what the proposal says. So I am in favor of contracting with Ehlers. No doubt about it. I think that they have produced really very good work. I think that they are exactly the right firm to do this sort of work. I don't know that 5,500 is reasonable. I actually agree with Marilyn because I don't know from anyone here whether or not we have a cash flow model to present to them.
There is a tab on the current Vanderwall spreadsheet that says cash flow. It's fairly rudimentary and I haven't looked at it since November.
Right. And so we don't know that that's what Ehlers is looking for when they mean cash flow.
Right. I'm not sure what the terms are. We would have to
Right,
talk to Ariana.
right.
about that.
So all I'm saying is that it's not cut and dry that it's a flat fee. That's all I'm saying. It might not be, it might be an hourly. But what I'm not disputing, Mark, is that Ehlers is the right consultancy. I'm not at all disputing that.
But I would also agree, I hope, that if they don't currently have the capability to model cash flow,
They do.
if they didn't,
But
we
they-
would still need it done.
But then we would need to find somebody who does have the capability of doing a cash flow.
Well, they have the capability. The question is whether they've done it or not, okay? Whether it already exists or not. And that's the point I'm not sure about. But in any event, I still get back to the issue of, is there any reason not to accept this contract? And
There is we have a motion, it's been seconded. Should we put it to a vote?
yes, let's do that. Let's do that. So all those in favor of accepting the motion, making the
Oh, can we
motion as
vote on
proposed to the board,
Oh, please.
all those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Yes.
There's a roll call.
You asked for roll call? Let me-
Okay, fine.
You do a quick copy and paste so I get everyone's name.
Are we closed for discussion?
We have, we're just waiting for the roll call vote.
I think what I'd like to say, the one last thing is,
No, we moved off that. now.
okay,
Let's get the vote done.
Okay, Gloria,
abstain.
Ron,
Vote in favor, yes.
yes. Liz,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes,
and Marilyn.
No,
Okay, so we have 3 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention.
motion carries. Is there any further discussion that committee members want to have on this topic of theater early closures? Gloria? Oh, how about
Liz
Liz?
first.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is off, topic, though, on TID closures. What is the whole thing about Rockies? Can we talk about Rocky, whatever Rocky's saying that he sent out some memo saying that we're under investigation and the finance committee's under investigation? Is that any
The
basis?
only thing that I'm aware of is there was an open records request from the district attorney's office to the village, which asked for a number of years, not just a single year, but going back, I don't know, 5, 10 years of the records of the TIDs. Okay, it was a very broad records request. It did not only include the TIDs, it include other issues as well.
Meetings. Yeah, series of different meetings, developer.
Developer agreements.
Is there anything specific about the finance committee?
Yes.
They just wanted copies of finance.
I don't recall the finance committee minutes.
And meetings, CBA meetings.
But it was very broad. It's a public document. I don't know if it's posted on the web, but it's accessible. We can get you a copy of
Okay.
it, that, right?
Okay.
There's no issue
Okay,
about
so
that.
there's not any.
It's an open request, but it's extremely broad and it goes back many years.
And follow up on that, because other people are involved in these kids, right? I mean,
I mean, the joint review board,
Yeah,
the
the
other
joint review.
entities.
do they have to weigh in on this whole, this service agreement at all?
Service agreement.
The one we just voted on,
Yeah.
No, they don't.
just us. Okay. Wouldn't it be? I really do not understand. I really do not understand the organization that these TIDs, that there isn't somebody from the finance committee on the joint review board and maybe somebody, it doesn't make sense to me. I do not see the line of,
It was originally structured where the chair of the plan commission, John Imes, is a member of the review board and is the village's representative on that board. But you're right, there's no finance committee representation on that board. But I think that's largely because when that was created and those districts were created, there was a large zoning component to it, and therefore it seemed to make sense that the plan commission would be involved in it.
as
But
opposed to the finance. Okay.
yeah, that's
Thank you.
where things stand. Gloria.
I would like to make the point. I do believe Julie Fitzgerald attends the joint review board meetings, and Julie Fitzgerald is our finance director. So
You get to talk? Do you get, because we listened to the last one, we weren't allowed to talk, we were just allowed to listen.
I'm there as a recording secretary. But I do work with Vanderwalls before, as they were creating the document, so I have my chance to ask questions and things with them. At the meeting, it's pretty much just more of a presentation. And it's more to keep the other entities informed.
So on that, if I could just pick up a nice segue, thank you. I would again introduce the idea that the board, Mark, I would like, if we need to make a motion, I'd like a motion for Mark to go to the board to present to them the email response that our attorney sent to Mr. Mooney and ask the board to consider and please come to agreement that low-cost housing is effectively the same as affordable housing, so that we have our board in consensus, and then to ask the joint review board to meet so that we have the other taxing authorities presented with the same information. Low-cost housing is the same as affordable housing, so that the taxing authorities can be in consensus, so that we can start moving forward in a reasonable way, exploring TID 4, TID 5 donations to TID 3.
Would you mind putting that on the board's agenda for the next meeting of the board? To clarify, to advise the board as to Bill Cole's opinion with respect to whether the TID 3 or the other TIDs are donation, are eligible for a donation. Right. But there, you're right. That was in the packet, by the way. There was a response to an email that Brian sent to Bill Cole, in which Bill Cole gave his opinion with respect to whether the TIDs were eligible to receive donations and walk through that language. I've sort of forgotten what page it's on, but I might be able to give you the page number.
12 of 60.
It was early in the packet. Through here, it's
It's page 12.
page 12.
So the upshot of that memo is just that it really could just go to the board for a decision, but to cross our Ts, dot our Is, we should really go to the joint review board and make sure the other taxing authorities are okay with this.
No, they don't really have jurisdiction on this.
Right.
Basically, they agree when we set up, but they have to agree to any amendments. But otherwise, they are not involved.
So you're not concerned at all. As long as our board decides that low cost is effectively the same as affordable housing, you're not worried at all that the taxing authorities will squawk.
They don't have a thing in it, actually.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah.
Don't need it. No.
But we will raise that issue with
It's on page
at the next meeting of the board. And the board can clarify whether it's comfortable that the TIDs are eligible to receive donations on the
Sure.
basis of the affordable housing that's available there.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay. Anything else on the TIDs before we move on to we're skipping item 8 for the, 7 for the moment and going on to item 8. But before we do that, is there anything else with respect to item 6? TID closures.
The only thing I have is that I would really like to have the focus not entirely on closing TID 4, but really with the objective to what could we do to close TID 3
I
early?
understand that perfectly. And what we'll do is if the board does approve the contract, right?
Mhm.
Because if they refuse it, then it doesn't make any difference. If the board agrees and adopts the proposal from Ellers, then at our next finance committee thereafter, we will talk about what kind of direction we wish to give Ellers as a finance committee, direction through Brian and from Brian to Ellers as to what is the strategy, what are the scenarios we wish to model. And we can also refine the cost and clear up a number of issues, but it'll definitely be on the finance agenda in May.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the TIDs?
So we don't have a meeting anymore.
I was going to say, what about April?
You
So
said in May.
You did, yeah. It was probably misspeak.
it was misspeaking. Yes, I believe the April board meeting is like the 21st. It's late because of the election, but we would still have a finance committee meeting. I don't know, our regular meeting might be just before that date because our regular meeting is the third Monday in each month. So it might precede the board meeting and that wouldn't make sense. So if it is,
She's saying it's
The fourth Monday.
The fourth Monday.
So the finance will be, next meeting will be April 27th. Board is
okay,
April
and that's,
21st.
and yes, so that's when it'll be on the agenda, assuming that the board approves the contract.
So we'll take it up again in finance on April 27th.
Yes,
And you'll take this to the board on April 21st.
I will.
Thank you.
Anything else on TIDS? Going once, going twice? All right, let's move on. So in the packet, Gloria included a memo with regard to the proposed analysis of 2025 overtime pay.
So,
You have
I
the floor.
thank you. I tried really hard to write this so that people could read this in advance and have as clear of an understanding as possible to not only inform the finance committee, but also the general public and hopefully reduce questions. My objective in choosing to look at 2025 was that we would have a closed year, January 1st through December 31st, and we would have a complete data set to look at the different departments in our village and anonymize the personnel so that nobody's on the hot seat, and cloak the hourly base wage of the personnel so that that their privacy is maintained, but also give us the tools to understand how is overtime affecting our budget. The numbers I used, just to clarify, I tried really hard to make it clear in my memo, were placeholders. I don't know. These are just out of thin air numbers. I don't know who's doing what. And but I use the numbers to give examples through the notes underneath each table, each department's table. But I think it might be very interesting for the finance committee and potentially the board to understand how is overtime being applied. If overtime is being applied such that my daughter, who is a lifeguard, is making more than Julie Fitzgerald as the finance director because she is non-exempt, while Julie Fitzgerald is exempt, and maybe my daughter works full-time, well, so does Julie Fitzgerald, but wouldn't it be awful if my daughter as a lifeguard made more money than Julie Fitzgerald? Or a more likely situation is, wouldn't it be something if our pool manager made less than the assistant manager who is seasonal and who is possibly not exempt? I'm mixing up, but full-time, but not salaried. Wouldn't that be awful if Dane is, but it might happen all the time, but that might be something that is hurting morale when somebody is working all the time and not getting overtime compared to somebody who comes in and is reporting to the person who's working so many hours, works fewer hours, but actually ends up making more. So I think it might be interesting to look at overtime, because with our upcoming deficit 2027 through 30, personnel is obviously a driving cost. And when we are paying employees overtime, not only are we paying them time and a half, but we're also making those extra contributions to the Wisconsin retirement system. And I don't know that there's a problem, but I don't know that there isn't a problem. And I think it might be interesting to look to see if there is.
Marilyn?
First of all, there's no privacy with any public employee wages, salaries. The only privacy is their social security number, perhaps their address. All public payments, public records. And a couple of years ago, I asked for the W-2s of all the staff, and I got them. Of course, they redacted the social security number and their address. It's all public information. One. Number two, I think it's important. And when I served as chair personnel, whenever we came to reviewing wages, hours, conditions of employment increases every year, I always got a spreadsheet, listed all the employees. We had what their salary was, their hourly rate. We had, generally I had what the overtime was. I believe I did. I'd have to look at those again. We shared them all with personnel. It's important when in looking at if there is overtime, and for example, one of the reports pointed out why the board a couple years ago paid a consultant, and I didn't object to that, but they kept it secret and went into closed session to look at the report from the consultant as to what each position should be paid, looking at the community. And one of the things they said, which was amazing to them, he said, wow, Shorewood Hills is unusual because the sergeant and lieutenant on the police department are paid as hourly employees. So then subsequently, when there were some complaints that we don't have enough police officers and our poor police officer staff has to work overtime, that is not a problem for some workers who want to get overtime in order to up their salary every year, and it increases the benefits into the retirement plan. I will agree with Gloria that we need to look at salaries and overtime and by employee so we can see who's getting all the overtime. I have no doubt our wonderful department heads work in good faith. I mean, our police chief, I recommended she be hired. But it is an employer decision, ultimately, to look at these numbers and say, no, we simply say to the department heads, we cannot have this amount of overtime. You figure it out, but if there is overtime, we want a special statement in writing why it's necessary, because we need to demonstrate to our community that we are paying attention to the money. And all the years I've worked as a labor and employment attorney, most of the time representing employees, we always have a good reason for asking for more, but ultimately the employer needs to decide that they need all the information. Last time I campaigned against the referendum because, as I explained to the residents in my letters, I thought the board did not do an adequate job. In fact, they didn't do a job, much less an adequate job, of explaining to the community why all of the 13% increase to the levy in perpetuity was necessary, and whether they had adequately explored other avenues. Now, as a lawyer who's represented employees, I know that employers look, first of all, we look at wages and hours. We have an obligation to do that. And if you recall at the January meeting, when our staff explained to us how much work folks were putting in, I focused on the hourly in the office and said, how much overtime do they have? I do not want to misquote you, Julie, but I heard you to say barely any because we're using flex time. And the worker staff was having flex time to cover the minutes of the meetings at night rather than work overtime. That's what I understood, and I want to look at hear the recording to be sure I understood correctly. But we are at a critical juncture. We're looking, a couple of our finance committee members have come up with this tip idea. Like, oh, maybe we can get money early. Well, I think it's worth looking at, not at any price, as I made clear, but I think it's worth looking at. And some of these raw numbers suggest it really won't address what we consider to be the deficit. But we need to look and be able to explain to residents. We've looked at the staff issues. We've looked at overtime, administrative staff, public works, police department. We saw a lot of overtime. We scrutinized that. Some of it was emergencies. Others was in order to get all the snow off the ground. Well, when I was a trustee, we had a policy and we told Public Works, and we have a wonderful Public Works, we don't want anyone out there snow plowing on weekends unless the snow is more than 2 inches high. We don't want the head of the Department of Public Works to get criticism from the residents. They say, we want these plowed at 1 inch. He said, no, your board, your elected officials have directed us not to. You yell at them. So for example, when I was a municipal court judge, people would come in and they yell at me as a judge that they got a ticket for going over 20 miles an hour. I would say, you know what? I just follow the law. You just go to the board meeting and you yell at the elected officials. My job is to say you violated the law. So we need to do this. It is critical. And what I want to do is I want to make a motion. And my motion is that we direct the staff to give us a printout by employee for the year 2025. What their position was, what their hourly rate is, and how much overtime they had. Police, administrative staff, public works, miscellaneous. With that information, we can look at it, we can ask questions, we can report to the board. But more importantly, the board has valuable information to make policy decisions that, okay, we've got to, if our police are spending a lot of time being backup for another department, we want to know that. So that's my motion.
Julie, did you get the motion?
I need
Maybe we need to
clarification.
clarify that.
Are you ready? So it's to direct staff to give us, do you mean provide finance committee or just?
Finance committee.
Okay,
Thank
to
you.
provide finance committee a printout by employee for 2025 by position. The number of hours and overtime hours and costs associated.
Well, what I wanted is I don't just want what they made. I wanted the wages, the overtime. And let me just say, I will not ask for the name of the employee, but I'll ask for the position. If it's police sergeant, police lieutenant.
So you need department too.
So, okay, print out by employee for
Yeah.
2025
By position.
by employee position. Okay, I want to make sure I get what you need.
Yeah,
For 2025, reflecting
their hourly wage
number of hours
in overtime. Because,
And I'm
and
assuming you
what
want
the
regular and
overtime
overtime hours.
rate was, because
I think
know-
so, Julie, yes.
Pardon?
She was asking the question, do you want regular hours as well as overtime
I
hours?
do, Jim.
I
I do
do,
for
yes. Okay, reflecting hourly wage, number of regular hours, overtime hours.
And the wage for overtime.
Okay. Yeah, that would be, okay.
Because I think it's generally time and a half, but I'd like to see what that actually.
Yeah, with the, occasionally with the police department, they have holidays that they get paid more if they're working on the holiday, but.
Oh, thank you.
So I
holiday-
think I see what you're looking, so you want.
But
basically what hours
holiday
and wages,
pay
Yeah,
as well. Because we can say sometimes, well, why is the sergeant working holiday at double time or whatever? Why can't you have a rank and file person? Or they may have a union contract that says seniority, I don't know what it says. But we'd love to look at that because so that we can give them guidance and the police chief can say, well, these are the directions from the powers that be.
So Marilyn, on page 65, I had a recommended motion. Did you want to look at that and just read that? Because then Julie's got it written down already.
Did you have it?
Yeah,
I'm
it's the very
sorry.
last page of my, very last page of my memo. Recommended motion to recommend an analysis, so you can tweak it out.
No, I'm not spreadsheet. Well, yeah, I think Julie's has it. I don't want to get her too complicated, just that basic information. Because for 2025, because then that'll tell us, and we've had some. I guess we did, I don't know how many snow days we had, but I am concerned about helping department heads
Have the board take.
control the overtime based on directives, because frankly, my experience representing employees, they love overtime. And when people would complain about it, I think, yeah, I bet they're unhappy, because it really does, especially when it really ups the calculations on retirement, which I'm not offended by, but I know sometimes people fight over time. They want to work those extra hours. I have a nephew who got publicity for being the one employee in Wisconsin with the most overtime. Because he worked at Lincoln Hills. He never had kids, he has a wife. He volunteered every holiday. And he just upped his retirement. He loved it. So, but I think we need this information to demonstrate to the residents when we say, well, listen, we looked at TIF. If you think what we're recommending for increase through the referendum is a lot, you should see what we initially thought until we looked at this and cut, and we looked at this and cut, and we looked at this.
So could we repeat the motion, please?
But Julie, did you have further questions on that? You were really
No,
helping.
I think let me read it and you can tweak it, okay? So I have a motion right now for Marilyn to direct staff to provide the finance committee with a printout by employee position for 2025, reflecting wage rates, amount of regular hours and overtime.
Right,
And then that would include all the different kinds of overtime as well.
And a total of the amount of overtime per employee for the year 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I would second that.
Just got one comment because I don't disagree with anything you're asking for, Marilyn, but I just think that there's a certain amount of context that may not be involved with this because I just put trust in a personnel committee and.
Typically though, when there's a motion, there's a second and then there's discussion. So I've seconded the motion. So now we're into discussion.
I thought we were
Yeah, they
just having
understood that,
discussion.
Yeah.
Just prior, just giving a chance.
Yeah,
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I thought you were
no,
leading the
Trying to,
discussion.
so to me, I just want to make sure if we're doing this analysis, that there's a reason for overtime in certain situations because the cost of hiring another employee the full-time or part-time basis and adding that other benefits to it. That's the only thing, my only hesitation is that when finance gets involved, we just may be in what you're asking for, we're just looking more at just quantifying things, and there's some qualitative aspects to it that also would be quantitative. That I think making sure that we get the input from Brian and Julie, because I've gone through this in the past where it seemed pretty cut and dry, that we were just having too much overtime, and really looking at more of the details into this. It just, the numbers sometimes don't always just look, really give an accurate depiction of what that extra cost is. And there's some other things. So I guess the only thing I want to say before we make this motion, what we're asking for, I just want to make sure the finance committee is really looking into this, is that we get some more context from personnel committee and from just Brian and Julie on this as well.
And I just wanted,
Let's go ahead.
you were chair of the personnel committee. Don't they do this? Do they
No.
look, they do not look at
No,
this?
not anymore.
They do what they want to do. That's the nature of committees, Liz. Depends who the chair is. Who the
Okay,
committee.
because I just don't want to replicate
But,
if something else is, somebody else is already doing it.
But
But I agree with also the comments that have just were made is that, I mean, we can say, oh, it would be better to have this person that gets paid less, do more overtime. But Brian may really know what people's skills are, and numbers don't mean everything.
Carolyn?
I absolutely agree with you. And I had no doubt in my mind that when these figures come back, as I already said, there are certain times the crew has a lot of overtime with the snow. Police may have a lot of overtime. As Brian and Julie get these back, they will, my experience is they always do, they put things in context. And then, based on that, I prefaced it with, I know as a resident, the department heads. And I have no doubt they are in good faith doing their jobs. But I also, it's important to know this basic raw data. So the finance can make recommendations to the board, and the board can set policy decisions when they learn that in their judgment, the department heads authorized overtime. And we say, no, we're going to take the heat. We're not going to, like we did when I was on the board. Public Works said you're not going to plow unless it gets to be 2 inches or more.
So Julie, as finance director, I think is a good person to weigh into.
As I'm thinking through it, as everyone's speaking, can I narrow this to include only full-time employees?
No.
Because otherwise we're going to, do I have to list?
No,
everyone?
the pool people, like the land rec people.
Right now, it'd be 30 employees. In the summer,
Right.
it's 180.
Oh,
Right. So no, just,
I thought, how many do we have? I thought we had 23 full-time.
so she's asking to exclude seasonal.
Well, no, I think, let me just ask, how many full-time people do we have?
I just pulled this, well, I don't know, we got empty spots now.
Or how many full-time positions do?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. It's somewhere between 23 and 30 is how per pay period. But some of those are also half-time positions. But again, if
I
they're
would
not
agree
full-time,
to
they're not gonna be-
excluding the
if they're not
pool
full-time,
staff.
They're not gonna be getting overtime.
I would agree to excluding the summertime pool staff, not Dane, not his
Dane is
managers.
exempt.
Right,
So,
but not excluding Dane, not excluding his managers, but the lifeguards, the checkers, concessions.
Those 23 to 30 people positions we want.
Right, that's what I don't think it'd be worth your time and my time to run it for all employees. That's
Agree.
all we're supposed to do.
Absolutely. And when
Yeah.
I asked for, I can go back on when I got all the W-2s and I worked with,
How about permanent positions? We have seasonal positions and permanent.
none of the season, the permanent
Okay.
position. Because I know we had a permanent part-time and then that was increased to
Right.
full-time for Stir.
But I would actually,
So
ask
permanent
please,
employees.
I would ask please, though, that you do include the permanent part-time if we have any of them
And that
anymore.
would be permanent. So
Yeah.
that would, so if I say by permanent employee position. there's
Right.
Permanent employees instead of seasonal.
Right, but I would ask that part-time people still
And
be
that
included
includes-
if we still have part-time.
Thank you, Julie. Anything else that you think about this? I should be thinking of, which I wasn't.
And Sean, I will agree with what you said. I think that Julie, in charge of payroll, Julie as the finance director, I think Brian Mooney as the administrator, they absolutely understand what's going on. And I'm relying on the two of them when this report comes back to finance to help us contextualize this. Absolutely. But because nobody else is doing this and we're going into an operational deficit and we're considering a tax levy referendum, someone has to do this. And I don't think it's as easy as just let the staff go on and do this, because ultimately we're responsible for directing the staff. I mean, the finance committee informs and advises the board, but the board directs the staff. And so we can't ask the staff to direct us while we're directing them. That's kind of a circular. At some point, the board does have to have the information.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that we, just as a committee, have it in context. as
Right.
well.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely agree.
Julie, and Brian, can you give us an idea how much time it's gonna take on your part to do this? Because one of the things I'm very concerned about, and I know we're all well aware of, we're short-staffed. We will be for a long time because the new employees are gonna have to go up the learning curve. And there are many other mandates, as we all know, running from the audit to open record requests to payroll, that absolutely have to be done. So in my mind, whether I could support something like this would depend on the burden that it places on the staff to produce the report and the relative benefit this report will provide. So I don't know, maybe there's a way we can kind of peel the onion here and get some kind of preliminary numbers to tell us whether this is something that has real promise in terms of delivering savings to the village, or is it just creating a lot of work and some savings, but the time of the committee, the time of the staff might be better directed into areas that have higher priority. So, Julie, Brian, can you give us Julie, do you have a sense of how much of your time this is going to require? And
So if we're just looking for annual totals, not like monthly the thing is, things fluctuate by season. And so I'm not sure how good our numbers are gonna be if I give you an annual total.
That's
Because
a good
What
start.
about quarterly?
Well, we want to make,
Okay.
I'm with Mark. We want to make this simple.
So we could look at the
Let's start
total.
with the annual, and that'll be some raw data. You are correct. Because some of them might be from the winter, but it gives us an outline and something to, I mean, one thing that really infuriated the residents last time during the referendum is none of this was even attempted, and new positions were created based on the referendum passing. I think this is just an overview. And we try and keep it more simple with just having it, as Gloria said, 2025. And having said that, Julie, sensitive to your time.
I will
So you can see
also,
what reports I have available. We do have a standard overtime report that I give to the police department every pay period.
Oh.
And I might be able to tweak that It depends on, creating reports is sometimes a challenge in our.
Is it only to the police department if you're giving an overtime report?
The official one, yeah, although we have a time report that we review for everyone. And all the supervisors approve every person's time card. so they
Right,
know
but so you're giving overtime reports
they have a
specific,
specific one that also includes their holiday pay, which is something they manage different than the rest of the.
I see. So only the police department currently gets an overtime
That's a
report
separate report, yeah,
and no other departments do.
no.
Is there, just like with the software that we use for payroll, isn't there just a coding for overtime? There's difference between holiday? Is it
Right, I
just-
think I can set up a report for
Yeah, I
this.
would think that there should be.
I should think so, yeah, if you could just kick out a report.
I don't see enough payroll systems where, I think
I
for
should-
what we're asking for, hopefully that's not a
Yes,
whole lot.
I don't think it's going to be terribly time consuming. Like I said, as long as we're looking for annual and I'm not breaking out,
Right.
Yeah,
yeah.
And
If we start with the
understanding.
bulk numbers and go backwards,
yeah.
the bulk numbers shouldn't be hard, but if you want to, that's why I said, what kind of detail are you looking for?
I'm okay with using some discretion and not taking a lot of time and looking first, and I'd just be curious what it is annually, what we're dealing with,
Yeah.
number of
Yeah,
hours,
I'm
what
sure.
that number is.
And we
Let's start
do
with that.
budget overtime into our budget.
Yep.
So that is something that, just so you know, it's like overtime isn't always gonna put us over budget because we do budget a certain amount of overtime as part of our budgeting process when we do those spreadsheets. So,
Brian, do you think this would be helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think this is something we should be trying to incorporate in on a regular basis. So I'm all for it. As we're talking about referendum and we're talking about potential of increasing costs, I think it's incumbent on us to also look at all the other ways that we can either reduce expenditures or keep expenditures better managed moving forward. So I think this is definitely something we should be trying to do on a semi-annual basis.
Thank you.
I'd like to suggest, though, we amend the motion to substitute the word request for direct. Because this committee does not direct the staff. We request information from the staff. We
I
make
like that.
recommendations.
Acceptance.
Any other further discussion on this subject? Seeing, hearing none, then are you ready to vote on it? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the motion carries.
I kept my hand up too long. You know that I was a yes. I forgot to put
I
my
put
hand
down
down.
after that.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
okay. Let's move on then to item number 7 on the agenda regarding proposal by Ellers to assist in a tax levy referendum planning. So the board at the last meeting made the request of the finance committee to consider what is in the packet on page 28, appendix B, not to be confused with the other appendix B, for the levy limit referendum assistance. I think the thing that concerned Brian and myself when we brought this to the attention of the board was the very long lead time to prepare a levy referendum. We've been through this once before, at least once before as a village. It's an extremely time-consuming and labor-consuming exercise. So you really got to get started early on it. And there are very limited windows, which also appeared in the meeting packet in terms of when you can have this referendum. So the next opportunity to do so in 2027, the committee already having recommended not doing any referendum in 26, is in April of 2027. And the question itself, which is the hardest part, would have to be formulated by January of 27. So that's only 9 months out roughly, which is not a lot of time to get through this exercise should we choose to do it. Even if we did it and the referendum passed, we wouldn't see any additional tax revenue until 2028. It would apply to 2028. If we pass up on this opportunity, the next opportunity, unfortunately, in 2027, the last opportunity to do something like this in a regular election is in April. So therefore, the next opportunity would be in 2028, and we wouldn't see the revenue until 2029. We've seen that we have some substantial operating deficits, not just this year, which we plugged with $120,000 from the rainy day fund, but in subsequent years as well. So the issue for us is, can we wait? And if we don't, can we wait until 2028 and run the risk that we have deficits not only this year, but in 2027, and for which we might have to spend down the rainy day fund further? Or are we in a position to move forward now and do a referendum in 2027? The question before us is not the referendum itself. First of all, that issue is not before us. It's not even before the board at this point in time. But the question is whether to engage Ellers with us in a planning process with respect to a referendum. They have done many referendums, assisted many municipalities in doing referendums in the past. They have our financial model, so they're in the best position to be able to run the scenarios that we would need run. And in my mind, this is more of a question of, probably more of a question of when rather than if. We all know that we have almost nothing in the way of net new construction, nor do we expect any in the near future. So that is not going to bail us out in terms of raise the levy limit. The other options, obviously, is to get additional revenue or to reduce operating costs, and we're continuing that discussion. But the size of the deficits, projected deficits, are very significant. So I think it's an open question for the committee to talk about, is whether we should begin the planning process now, regardless of whether the board decides in its wisdom to go forward with a referendum or not in 2027, or do we put it off for a future year, whether that be 2028 and 29, and then run the risk that these deficits are as large or even larger than projected. And at that point, the only way that we could bring them down potentially would be using unassigned fund balance. Now, we have had a fairly good balance, a high balance in our unassigned fund balance, but we've already agreed, the village has an approved budget to bring that down by $120,000 this year. That was the gap that we plugged. In 27, right now that projected gap is another 92,000, which again, it's possible to take it out of the rainy day fund. Unfortunately, we do not yet know what our rainy day fund balance is. And we won't know that until the audit is completed, which currently is June, I think we're talking about, Julie, is that right? In the June timeframe before we have audited results. So we don't know where our balances are in the general fund, as well as the TIDs themselves. So there is some information that we do not have at hand to plug into the financial models, but we expect to have as we move forward in the process. So with that thinking, Brian asked Ariana to give us a proposal, which is before you. And then I'll just open it up to discussion as whether this is the time to take up that opportunity or whether it's something that the committee thinks should be deferred for a future year.
Will you just
Liz.
refresh my recollection in that when we said we took money from the rainy day fund, we have a policy that the rainy day fund is 15 to 25% of
Correct.
X, I can't remember, but the money we took was above 25%. So we didn't even go into the 15 to 25%
You're still
area.
within range.
So so
Right.
in some ways, we took money that really shouldn't have even been in our rainy day fund because we had too much money. I mean, you could look at it that way, right?
It's a rainy day fund. You can never, well,
No,
I
you
get your
can,
point.
you can actually, because when you are taxing residents, you do have a responsibility not to overtax such that you're creating a surplus.
But we also have the constraints of levy limits and the uncertainty as to the
Right.
future. So I'm sure at the time, we didn't necessarily think we were going to be over our 25%,
Well,
but that's just the way things.
no,
Yeah.
we did discuss
Yeah,
it.
there's 26%.
We did, yeah, we did discuss it. Was it
Yeah.
26 or 28? Well, anyway,
Well, it was more than 25. It
Yeah,
was
but-
already-
so,
But, and one just other point on that is that those were projections that Julie and I worked on to get to those numbers.
mhm,
But since we do not have the 25 audit yet,
we can't.
we can't say, and that's one of the uncomfortable positions we're in right now, is we can do all these kind of calculations and estimates, but we can't know for sure. And that's part of the risk, the uncertainty that we have to factor in.
So we're really, and this, we're really being asked to do something when we basically don't have information. But the problem is we won't have the information until July, which really puts us on a very thin timeline for,
It would be very hard because remember that beginning in the summer, that's when the staff starts to work on the 2027 budget. We know that last year, with respect to the capital investment plan, we were only able to approve the 1 year, 2026, and we really need a 5-year capital investment plan. So there's just a ton of work, financial and otherwise, that the staff will be facing as we get to midsummer and basically throughout the rest of the year. So to the extent that we wanted to move forward with the referendum, or we thought we might need to go forward with it, the staff will, in my mind, definitely need the assistance of someone like Ellers. And Ellers is the natural choice because they developed the financial management plan for us. So that answer your question?
yes, thank you.
Okay, Gloria?
So the levy limits, so that's our cap, and that is when we build up a surplus, you basically said that we have to build up a surplus because of the levy limits, that we need that extra money on occasion. So I don't disagree with you. I do disagree at the level to which we're saving into our surplus. I don't think we should be going that high. There's a reason we have that range. But also I want to circle back to the capital investment plan. So our debt levy is not limited in the same way as our operational
Correct.
budget
It's not
is
limited.
levy is limited. And because we don't have an approved CIP, and I know that you advocated that
1
we
year.
did. Yeah, I know. I remember, but my point being is that because we don't have a CIP that's been approved, capital investment plan that's been approved, we don't know how much our debt levy is going to be. Without knowing how much the debt levy is going to be, we can't really tell residents what their overall tax burden projected will be. And I really feel that, yes, we don't have time. This is what I have been saying. We don't have time. We got to get going on this. I'm feeling a little bit frantic about it, truth be told, but we have to sort a lot out, not just whether or not to hire this consultant to guide us towards tax levy referendum. We do have to explore other options so that our residents can understand and trust that we really have explored and picked through our budget and like, really, folks, this is really where we're at. This is what we have to do. But without having our CIP in place, without having a good handle on what our debt levy is going to be, how can we then go forward to say this is what we want our tax levy to be when we don't have that information?
It would be, in my mind, it'd be a little bit of an act of faith on our part that we would get that information as we work through the year. We don't have it now, clearly, but there will be a process of putting together the 2027 budget, which will start in midsummer or a little earlier. There will be a process by which a 5-year CIP is developed, all of which needs to be approved by the board by November at our November meeting. So that information would be forthcoming in the normal course, whether we're dealing with a levy referendum or not. The problem, of course, being that it's all coming on the back end. We're getting all these open issues are being resolved, but down the road. So the board would be and we would be in the difficult position of now we're sitting here in November. We have the 27 operating budget. We know what the 5-year CIP is. And now in the space of a month, maybe a month and a half, we would actually at that point have to craft the language of the referendum. We would have the information, but it would be a very short time frame to craft that. And then, of course, the process would be, we'd have to have, I think, the language by January sometime, as I recall, which would then give us a couple of months to educate the residents based on the model and the projections as to what the impact of the referendum would be. So, I mean, I think that we all understand the pieces that would have to come together to get there. The time is admittedly is very tight.
The timing is what makes me so concerned. Because, well, hold on, because
Oh, I
unless
that's
you,
what I'm saying.
but specifically because we're looking at going to referendum in 2027, which puts us into the school board elections. Dane County is projecting a $32 million deficit beginning in 2027 and progressively getting worse, just like we are. And so if Dane County decides to go to levy referendum as well, because we already know they're not doing it this year, but if they decide to go to levy referendum next year in 2027, and we're running a levy referendum at the same time, I don't see our levy referendum being successful in 2027. And I believe very strongly that if we are going to go to tax levy referendum, we have to do it to succeed. We have to do it to succeed because we will paint ourselves into a corner otherwise where we have no other options.
Yeah. The other thing going for us, though, is that if we decide to go forward with an early closure of a TID, like a TID 4 in 2027, that would have the effect of bringing down the tax rate in the village. So there would be some offsetting effects of, yes, we're raising the levy limit, but at the same time, the tax rate is coming down because we now have brought
that does not escape me, that we could effectively market it to residents that we're freezing our tax rate. Right. That's not lost on me.
Yeah.
I'm simply saying that we're really behind the ball on a lot, not just going to levy referendum. We're behind on a lot. And to that, I would like to please ask for a commitment that we do hold to our regular meeting schedule for the remainder of the year.
Okay, but let's set that aside. Let's stay on topic. Which
Well, I
is
think that's pretty important.
The levy referendum. So I think we have a lot of shared understanding on this. And I think from my point of view, again, it's a question more of when we're going to referendum rather than if, because of the constraint of referendum, the levy limit, and the fact that inflation is running 3% or above. And in those circumstances, the gap is going to be there and it will need to be closed. And I just don't see anything other than a referendum that's going to do it. But whether we're in a position to do it in 27, whether we're better off waiting till 28, we will certainly be smarter in 28, but it does mean that we may have to use more of the unassigned fund balance in 2027, just as we did this year, without knowing exactly where our balance is.
We're gonna have that every year though, right?
Yeah.
Well, normally, I think last year we had some audit results in as early as February, I think it was, or maybe it was March, but we had a much better handle on where we are than we do this year. So I'd say this year had, yes, every year there's some uncertainty because of the timing, but this year it's greater than usual.
You're really asking us whether or not you think we should go ahead this year or wait until 2028.
Yeah, if we decide to pass on this and not recommend this to the board, I don't think we'll get another chance to take this up this year, not because mechanically we couldn't do it, we couldn't ask them, but because the time just gets shorter and shorter and shorter. So if we were going to go forward, we should go forward now. If we don't go forward, then we sort of have to accept the fact that whatever the operating deficit is in 27, we're going to have to close through other means, which will be most likely unassigned funds balance. There's still the wheel tax. There's still this discussion about overtime. And, there may be things we can do at the margins. But my gut is that the burden will largely fall on the unassigned fund balance. And if I had a better feeling about where the unassigned fund balance is at this point, I'd feel a little better about the decision. But
You don't have any guess.
yeah. So that's where we are. Marilyn.
Two questions. Number one, following up on what Liz was saying earlier, or questions on the rainy day fund. The only thing that came out of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, was the 130,000, correct? To
120,000, I
balance the
believe,
budget.
was what was
So
pulled.
the audit shouldn't be a revelation as to suddenly the money is gone away, correct? It would still be a substantial amount.
It's a moving target.
And it's a moving target. Why? Explain.
it's-
to-
Well, let's.
I'm not going to explain moving to, but again, it's always a little bit of a moving target for like, I can't even remember the terminology for what we might have said. It's not part of unassigned fund balance, but I guess what I was going to say, a similar thing to what Marilyn, I think, is just commenting on or asking, is that I feel like every single year we have probably a really good idea of what that unassigned fund balance is, like plus or minus, like maybe 50,000. I even feel is like a pretty big variance, and normally it's less than that. Okay, so is there something that I'm not?
No, I agree.
aware
I
of?
agree,
Because
Sean.
like,
I'm
have that
so far
knowledge
behind
base.
this year that normally I would have that number for you by now. And it
But it not an
It
exact
kills
number,
me
but
that I don't, but we had some, we need to look, we had some variances in the budget. We had a lot of staff turnover, so that affected overtime, affected hiring, affected. And we had a lot of consultant fees that we didn't plan for, so it's all these little things, it's like 10,000 here, 10,000 there, 10,000 here. And I have to pull it together, I have to review it, and we have to look at the auditor entries, because a lot of times we do bunch of auditor entries that moves things from fund to fund and, clear some of that. And so I just don't have a good target right now, and it's driving me nuts.
I get it. Nobody wants to be on just held for anything if there's like a big variance like that. But I guess to me, it's like if we can go into I guess what is kind of in your mind, Mark, like what is like a deadline where, hey, we have to give a recommendation to the board and this has to be acted upon if we're going to do anything for 27. But I do feel like this committee, for us to really take a look at where we are with the unassigned fund balance, because normally it is higher. I feel like we do have, like, in my mind, before this meeting, and I didn't look at the exact numbers, I felt like we might have enough cushion where I'd be comfortable where we're not even getting, if we had to eat up quite a bit, 27, that we still would be above that 15%. Again, it would make me feel comfortable, but I feel like we'd have maybe a little bit more information to make a good decision or a recommendation. So I guess just time-wise, where do you feel like we are at that point where if we go past, May 1st, June 1st, we're really getting into a point where we can't really do this properly if we have to go to referendum.
Yeah, I kind of think that's where we are, just
We're like
because,
right now.
yeah, that now is the time.
Okay.
If we push this much further out, given how short-staffed we are,
Okay,
if we don't bring in somebody like Ellers to assist us in this process and help guide us, I would be really concerned about reaching, getting to a levy question by January of next year. But again, I mean, this is being brought before the committee. I don't have the answer on this one. There's a lot of uncertainty. Normal years, I would be inclined to roll the dice because we will get a lot of information when the 27 budget is compiled this year. We will have the CIP, hopefully 5-year CIP, and that will help give us a much better basis to make a decision. But it does, I just want the committee to recognize that it's not a risk-free decision, and we don't want that operating fund balance, the unassigned fund balance, to run too low because we don't want to damage our AAA bond rating. And the fact is that once the levy referendum is passed, that additional revenue will actually give us more borrowing capacity, because as the committee has seen in the past, what really limits our ability to borrow is when people get uncomfortable when that debt service coverage, remember it hitting that 20% kind of
25%,
number.
Yeah, 25%.
And once the denominator, which is the operating budget, the operating revenue increases, that gives us more latitude to borrow going forward. So it's something I think we naturally want to do. And it's so, to me, I don't look beyond 2028. I really see the levy referendum either in 27 or 28. And there's no clear answer as to which one is better. There are pros and cons. Yeah, Brian.
Well, Mark just said the main point that I was going to say was that our financial advisors have stated that it's a risky proposition to be relying on your fund balance as far as your overall hit to your potential rating as a municipality. I think inherent to any discussion about going to referendum, there's other pieces of this equation that I think we need to start also considering discussing. One of the factors that really hurt Julie and I last year was completing our budget, but we still have open windows for people to enroll in insurance that's still open beyond when we have to finish our budgets. And we found out that people were waiting to see what the new rates were going to be or their spouse's rates were going to be. And then they coming back to the village administrative offices saying, I want to take a family insurance plan. I wasn't taking insurance this last year. Now I need it. And that's a big hit to a budget that's finalized, which caused us to have to go into using the rainy day fund reserves in a much larger capacity than we were planning, because we don't currently budget every employee that's full-time built into the system with the assumption that they're taking a family plan.
Yeah.
So also when we have staff turnover throughout the calendar year, if someone departs who was not using village insurance and they are replaced with somebody who's coming on board who needs insurance that we hire from the outside, that's an unanticipated huge cost to the budget that we don't currently have any wiggle room to handle. So factors like that are definitely a challenge to the administrative team. We also have subcategories. I mean, I try to run as conservative a budget as I can for the sake of the village. I don't give our department heads much capacity to change their numbers greatly. I mostly try to keep them within the same range as the prior year, with some strategic reallocations from other accounts to more or less come into the range of the similar numbers from the prior year. But that being said, I mean, I need to bring to your attention, there are some categories within consultants that I've seen, and I see these charges, and I just know our budget's not keeping up with the costs and the demands and those increases. Case in point, like last year, our zoning consultant, we had an overall budget of $1,500 set up for our zoning consultant. If you've been paying attention, we had a little thing called the Sweetbriar property matter up. Last year, that budget was so blown. I don't even want to give the figure here, but I mean, it wasn't even in the range of acceptability. And we're facing that same figure this year. We've had a lot of issues that have required legal counsel of late. Those budget numbers have stayed relatively flat for the last few years. And we, comparatively speaking, are going through those funds so rapidly based on issues that have popped up or things that haven't been left unresolved, that we're ill-equipped to continue to use those numbers and not be surprised, I guess, when we greatly exceed that. So these are some of the factors, and this is why I wanted to include that referendum policy decisions. We also have lost a few staff members who have taken considerable raises to go to the same position on a lateral basis to the same job with a substantial pay increase. And this is going to be a kind of one of those, one step forward, two steps back that we want to.
Repeat that. I'm sorry, I'm not following that last sentence. Staff have.
So we've had some departures of staff to other neighboring municipalities recently, where the staff hasn't exactly taken a promotion by standards. They've actually taken a lateral position transfer to a new municipality, but have received such a substantial increase that it was worth their leaving for the same position elsewhere, just because of how far behind.
Would that be Chrissy, for
Yeah,
example? Well, but then I'm confused because then I hear different. So Chrissy left because of pay.
She left for a lot of reasons,
Right, but so.
one of which was pay. I
Okay,
think that's
right,
all I
so,
would say.
I would just say there's a gap. between
Sure.
things.
sure, but I mean, but this is what I hear going on all the time, where we're comparing to these different neighboring municipalities,
Correct.
and then they reference back to us, and it's like an arms race.
Yeah.
And so at some point, what we need to do is really address the climate so that people don't
Exactly.
want to leave because they like it here. Not to say that, and Julie's like, yeah, right. But I mean, not to say that people should not work for money. Of course, you're going to work for money,
Yeah.
but we really need to take proactive measures to calming everything down. I do have a question regarding those,
I was just going to say, I had 2 points when I finally got the attention before. One was what I brought up.
Carol, why don't you finish yours and then we'll go back to
Okay.
Gloria. Go
I
ahead.
never got to my second point. But just as an aside, Brian, that's all fascinating. That's really interesting. And I appreciate hearing particularly that health insurance, taking a family plan when you thought they'd take
Yeah.
a single or, yeah, so. But getting back to the issue of whether this committee supports a referendum. And if yes, when. And what we do as a committee and as a board to show the residents that we've done everything short of before we ask them to increase revenue. Like the last referendum was 13% increase. I take exception, Mark, and I have for years, so I'll be a broken record, when you said there's no net new construction isn't going to happen. And I have repeatedly said as a resident and talked to the board almost for a while every other meeting, we have over 2 acres of vacant, minimally taxed land in Garden Homes. It's it's been brought up during this campaign, and if I have anything to say about it, it'll be front and center when the residents are deciding who to vote for. But we had a proposal in 2019 from the owner of most of those, approximately 27 lots. The owner now is 28, 16 of which were vacant. No tip money proposed on Burbank, which is basically empty, multi-unit apartments, which would have been next to UW Credit, so it isn't like it's a residential. On the other side would be the Lodge, which is tons of apartments. And it was shot down in Plan Commission, which basically had 2 board members, and no one on the board was willing to provide any leadership for addressing, negotiating with that owner of this property, anything other than small single-family homes, which would not be affordable in this market. They would have been, at least even now, over $500,000. And I think it would be, and I know during the last referendum, the residents were very concerned that the governing board had done nothing other than blame the owner, saying, well, he never brought us a proposal. He did bring a proposal. And then the signals were clear. The only proposal he could bring them that they would entertain would be single-family homes, and they blamed zoning, this, that, the other thing. There is an opportunity for net new construction. And I recall when I brought it up, when the board member said, well, I wouldn't have brought in that much money anyway. I said, you tell that to the residents. I wouldn't campaign on that item. So that I think before we recommend to the board any referendum, we recommend that they address how to negotiate a deal with the owner of all these lots. It's 28, maybe he owns more, on multi-unit housing. At least on Burbank, which is a total dirt pile. Instead, we have several board members who stand in the way of that, in my view, and everyone can admit, no, that's not true. It's all the owner's fault. And I don't know what that owner's position is now, but in 2019, he wasn't asking for TIF funding. We now have a proposal where at the Plan Commission, where another developer, when asked, do you want TIF? He didn't say no, and we all who have dealt with him knows he always wants TIF. So I think there's an obligation from finance to say there are additional sources of revenue. And I think it falls on deaf ears for anyone to say, well, it really wouldn't come in for a few years. Well, when this owner couldn't get his multi-unit housing approved in 2019, he just went down the block on the other side of the street, built housing like overnight, which is bringing in revenue for Madison. So I think there needs to be, and you wouldn't have to change the zoning. You could do a PUD. Again, I'm not an expert in that area, but this village approved all those lodge apartments and everything else. It's clearly a high density area along the university corridor. So, any event, I think that's a plain revenue source. And if there was good faith effort to move on that, then if a referendum came by, not next year, but the next, the residents would say, wow, at last, they're looking for new revenue sources, scrutinize positions. They looked at TIF. This is a board and committees who really were not looking at the resident's pocketbook in the first instance, but in the third instance. So that is my response to voting tonight to recommend consultant
Gloria.
study referendum.
Did you want a response from that, to that?
Oh, I
Okay,
appreciate all.
So, I mean, did you want to respond to her?
The only thing I would say to all that is that the test case is not going to be Garden Homes. It's going to be
Test case.
the test case. When this is first going to come before the board and plan commission, it's not going to be Garden Homes.
What's the test case going to be?
It's going to be John Fladd's proposed development on Locust.
Really?
Warren's already come before the board and came
Why-
before
why
the
is
board or
that-
was it the plan commission?
Why is that the test case?
Because he's so much further along. It was a 100-page document with layouts and specs, and it was quite detailed proposal
Oh, I
that he made.
remember, I
And I
looked
think
at
it
it.
was plan commission, was it not, rather than the board?
It was February 10th at the Plan Commission.
Yeah, exactly.
And I
So
remember
that's
that
much
because I
further along
remember
than anything Deegan has
the
worked on.
juxtaposition that he was allowed to, during Plan Commission, speak freely. No one asked him once about Joyce Erdman Place and why that was absorbed into his plans.
Oh, I think that was asked. at
No,
some
it was
point.
not. Maybe you can,
Craig,
maybe you can
yes.
pull the tape and ask, why is this privately maintained or is it public? Nobody asked that. Is this being sold to him? Or is this going to be maintained by the village? I did not hear that question. I did hear Mr. Fladd be able to have the floor, enjoy the floor, because I felt that sting when I went in front of personnel to help try to guide the retention package and felt limited to 4 minutes.
Okay, but my only point is, that's further along than
Yeah.
Garden Homes.
Right.
And so that's where the rubber's gonna hit the road first.
To that is, first of all, this board can do two things at once, number one. Number two, unless the owner of these 27 plus lots is told that this board will entertain multi-unit housing. If he's told that, I bet you that guy can work very fast, but he is not about to do what he did in 2019, invest tons of dollars and then get hit with a brick wall and instead have people say, bring me a proposal. Bring him a proposal. I mean, he's not someone who's going to waste his time. So you say Fladd's way ahead. He's ahead because they've been talking to him for years and encouraging him behind the scenes. Do you think this came out of nowhere? I mean, come on.
Okay, so if I might ask my questions, Mark, the very specific question I had is regarding the CIP. Are you going to take to the board the request in April 2026 to start now to develop the CIP so that finance can look at this in preparation for this tax levy referendum? Because we do need to have this information.
Yeah, and as you know, the board has already requested RFPs with respect to Village Hall and with respect to the public, well, not with respect to Public Works building, but with respect to Village Hall.
But that's for,
And so, I mean,
but
so
that's for
there-
2026.
that is a 2026 project.
Right.
approach to begin 2026.
So I'm asking regarding 2027.
And I, you know, absolutely. I think the sooner the board can start to focus on the CIP.
So
make
you'll take that
commitment.
to the board next month. That's wonderful. Brian, I have a question for you. Looking at the November 24th, 2025 Finance Committee package, you'll remember that you brought to the Finance Committee the fee structure. And at that time, we highlighted a few fees that maybe we could look at adjusting. So your remark about the 1,500 budget for zoning consultants and how we have blown through that. My question to you then is, were those fee structures revised when, after they came to the Finance Committee in November
The fees for
for zoning?
zoning amounts, yes, for this year, we upped the zoning budget to 5,500.
No, I mean the fee structure, the zoning fees. So for example, planned unit development, PUD, which is what Mr. Deegan would need to do if he were to develop the unit housing and garden homes. He would need, if let's using Mr. Deegan as an example, if he were to have a PUD, he would need to pay $350 plus consultant cost. Has that fee been
That's
adjusted?
brought that.
Okay, so this is something that in November we discussed, that as I recall, from Planning Commission, there was the complaint that the fees that we're charging currently are less than our expenses to conduct those services, to provide those services for the fees. So can we please come up to market on our fee structure?
How would that, that's a good point, can you refresh my recollection? I remember that. Were there other areas? Oh, I know, let me
It's right
back
here.
up on that, right. There were proposed amounts and we were trying to see what.
It was just current. No, they just gave us current. In November, they gave us the current fee structure.
Right, right.
And they were asking us what we thought, remember, because we talked about the parking tickets and we said, oh, please don't touch that. Remember?
No, but we talked about what, in fairness to Brian, about what we would propose to raise them to. And that,
We haven't picked it up since.
well, but in part, I sent it over to Greg Reinhardt and said, hey, could you give me input on this? I never heard back, and I had undertaken to try and relieve some burden from staff. And what I don't know is how much Madison charges, and that would probably help here. And I should just,
So I'm making a note on this, the fee structure, so that for the next month's meeting, we can have some kind of an analysis that is not pulled together by Julie, but it's.
or, yeah.
Right.
Julia,
So
right,
if
that
you would like to work with me
Yes,
on that,
why
let's
don't
do
I
that.
do that?
Saying we're going to do this as opposed to the plan commission.
No, what I'm suggesting is that Brian Mooney gave us this great fee structure
Mhm.
that of the current fee structures in November. And what I'm proposing, and I think what Marilyn is proposing, rather than asking Julie Fitzgerald, rather than asking Brian Mooney to do this, as a committee, can we designate two people? I vote Marilyn and me
And
to
in
look into
fairness,
neighboring municipalities to see what they charge for this and to see if we're at least comparable. Can we adjust up?
and in fairness, frankly, I think the ball was in my court in
Okay.
November, so it wasn't.
Well, regardless, I'm just saying is that
Well,
I
I
heard,
wanted to
I
be
heard that
clear,
we're above
because
budget.
It's enough.
Oh, I'm not, Brian, you don't feel
What
like
have you done?
no. And so, no.
Or Julie, right.
Go ahead, Julie.
Okay, just one thing I do want to point out, and this is the elephant in the room that people don't want to hear. The numbers Brian was quoting from, he was quoting from the expenses. I know because he had me booked for them today. The reason the consultant fees are at a fairly low amount for budget purposes is because we have in our ordinance that if there are, if there's, I can't give you the whole list, it's appeals, variances, CUPs that require additional consultant fees, we shall charge the people applying. Last year, there was a very large amount of consultant fees that the board chose to waive. And that's what.
Well, as I
it was the consultant fees that were supposed to be charged to the appellants, and that was waived as a goodwill
Oh, yeah.
gesture.
Because they prevailed.
Not
No.
because they prevailed.
No.
That's not in
No,
our
they
ordinance.
didn't prevail.
They didn't. Well,
I think they did.
Well, I
it
think
was, but it's in our ordinance that the appellants have to pay that, and the board chose not to, so that is why it was like 10 times what the budget was.
Well,
So just so you know, I'm not saying we shouldn't.
yeah, but you know, I guess I feel like this is kind of opening up a political can of.
And I don't want to open.
And I know you don't. I know you
That's
just, I
why
know.
that- But
No,
that's
but
why
that-
that's budgeted different.
Right, I
Because-
understand.
But why don't we just, we've agreed here and this was helpful.
Yeah, I agree.
And
Let's just do that.
We'll agree.
I mean, as long as the committee is okay with that. What do you think,
No,
folks?
no, I mean, if you want to do that research and bring it back to the committee, I think that's.
Okay, let's do that.
I was
Liz.
just gonna try and bring us back to what I thought we were talking about, which was whether or not to vote on Eller's proposal. I will say, I thought that we had enough money. I mean, my gut was that we had enough money in the rainy day fund to cover this, except until I heard Brian talk.
Yeah,
So now, so that's scaring me. I really am, I've never done this before, so you've gone through the referendums
we're all in
before.
the same position. We
But-
all have the same uncertainties.
And my gut, I don't think we're gonna get it through without
agree.
doing more right now. And
I
I
agree.
know that it makes sense to be cautious and vote for this right now. But I don't think we're gonna get it through for the reasons people have been saying. We have to explore our expenses more. We have to explore, how to up our income. We have to do some more things. I'm hoping that there is more money in the rainy day fund that can plug it up one more year. But, well, now I at least understand why you were.
Yeah, and
Bringing
the other thing is that we're planning on going to market later this year to raise some money
Mhm.
because we've got this $3.5 million budget on capital projects, village hall, so on. So if the board accepts the RFPs and decides to move forward on that, we'll have to be sitting down with bond counsel and this issue of the sale of those bonds. They'll be looking at the village. They'll be looking at the village finances. They'll be saying, where does your general fund stand? So unfortunately, there'll be that extra level of scrutiny as we go through the building process. It's just one more thing, but I totally get where you're coming from. And, 6 months ago, I'd say, well, yeah, the general fund looks fine, whatever. But now we've entered this dark period, not knowing. We know if there are some accounts where we're spending over our budget or had spent over our budget. And so, and it's unfortunate that come June, we'll have a better handle on this, but come June, now we're down to like a 6-month window to try to get this thing done. And it's like, it's not enough time. And that's why it's sitting in our lap today.
I am not going to support a 2027 tax levy. And I'm really.
That's not, but
Well,
that's not on the table today.
I understand that,
It's
but
just
I am also
planning.
not, I understand that, but I am also not supportive of hiring a consultant to start the planning.
Fair.
And I'd like to explain why. The explanation I have is because I don't think that we have pursued the TID strategy appropriately. We have been asking for this and it has been delayed, it has been stalled, and we're still not having the numbers that I think we could have already had by now. We need to explore cost savings thoroughly, and I have seen suggestions be tabled. For example, in January, there was the suggestion made that we go to the committees, and I recall hearing that we don't need to because the staff have this. We have to do this work. We have to show our taxpayers that we are looking into this, that we are looking at everything. We have to make a compelling case for tax levy referendum. I hear you and I understand very fully this. Remember, this was where we were going with this. I understand that if we are able to close a TID, that is going to lower our tax rate, which is genius because then we could actually go to levy referendum to actually freeze our tax rate where it is right now at 3.79. I understand that very fully, but I also understand that Dane County is very likely to go to tax levy referendum next year. We do have the surplus. We are at AAA. We compare ourselves so much to other municipalities. I really like it that we're AAA, but the other municipalities have not hung on to their AAA status, but yet they're able to function just fine. The world does not collapse because they're not AAA. We need to pursue these other options, and I don't see a benefit right now of signing up for a consultant to pursue tax levy referendum. In fact, I see that as the risk. Because once we commit to signing up for these consultants to pursue it, game over. That's where we're going. I've seen this direction for several months now. That's where we're going. And I'm really concerned about approving even this contract. You'll recall that in January, we tried to come through this finance committee with the background for Sun Prairie tax levy referendum. So this finance committee could understand everything that goes into running a successful tax levy referendum. And you said we've got plenty of time. And here we are 2 months later and suddenly hair on fire. I am so tired of hair on fire. I'd like to move with planning and foresight instead of just being so reactionary all the time. And I'm not going to be able to support this to the board, this proposal.
Other thoughts? Anyone? Okay. Does anyone wish to bring a motion?
I move that Mark takes to the board next month, April 2026, a request for the board to prioritize the CIP for 2027 through 2032. So that the finance committee can start to consider their priorities sooner than later.
Is there a second? Doesn't sound like it. Any further discussion with respect to the levy limit referendum?
I guess for me, I wouldn't support it right now. I just feel like we do need a little bit more information and understand the time constraint that we're under. I just feel like I wouldn't support it. I would almost rather get to that cliff where I feel comfortable enough where we do have enough in the unassigned fund balance. And I know we don't have exact numbers, but I would rather go down that road. And I think it might be a more compelling argument if we did cut our general fund budget down or the unassigned fund balance where residents, it would probably help be in a scenario where it would be more likely to be approved maybe further down the road. So right now, I don't know, I'm on the fence, but I just don't feel comfortable to really support doing the work right now. And I'd rather get more information and start looking at some other measures to cut expenses. And even though I think even if we do a very good job at that, I still feel like 2028, we're going to have to do a referendum anyways. I mean, it's just simple math that with the increase, I mean, in that one packet that Ellers put together, it shows that its expenses are going up 4.3%. And then non-levy revenue, it's 2%, I think even might be optimistic when we really look back at what it's been. We're going to be running into this at some point, but right now,
I agree.
I think we are better off looking at what can we do, get support of the public to say, look, we are looking at every way to cut expenses and to be reasonable with how we manage the village.
And truth be told, 2028,
If it means pushing it up to 28.
Yeah.
I'd rather do it.
2028, I think is a better year to have a levy referendum. It gives us more options as well. We could, if we did find that is, and I agree with you, the numbers are saying that's true, that is our trajectory. But August 2028 would be much more preferable to running on school board, and especially running against Dane County.
Yeah.
Well, I
see,
think it actually even better would be earlier in the year, because if you hold the referendum in August, the finance Julie, Brian would have to have dual plans because of the need to budget.
No,
And
do
not
it.
knowing, we've done that, we've gone down that road before, so it would be good to resolve the question early in 28 so that they knew
Okay, but
as they go into the 28, the 29 budgeting process, they know
We
exactly
would have
where
started
they
the
stand.
Yeah.
budget, but November would be the one that we.
That would be the one
absolutely
that's
would
not
have
that. No, I'm not saying
to-
November. I'm saying August. August would allow Brian and Julie to avoid exactly the scenario you just laid out.
If the election, we're talking about an election in August as opposed to the referendum.
No, I'm saying the referendum would go to election in
Yeah,
August.
Yeah, if it was decided by August,
Yeah, that would be decided because it
Yeah.
would be on the ballot in August.
could probably. do that. Okay. Marilyn,
In addition to what I already said about the fact that I think there has to be serious negotiations on doing multi-unit housing and garden homes, I want to pick up on something Brian said and not just focus as I did earlier, or look like I focused earlier on looking at staff overtime. I would really like to look at the attorney bills for 2025. I always scrutinized attorney bills when I worked for an organization as an attorney. And that doesn't take away from the good faith of billing, which I did in my law firm and does in hers, or did in hers for 30 years. But it's not enough just to get the bottom line. It's seeing what their actual raw invoice was. And I know we use attorneys for consulting, for labor and employment, for zoning, this issue, that issue. And I would like to get the consensus of this committee that I could, and anyone else who wants to, but I don't think we all have to look at them as a committee, if you differ, that's fine. But between now and the next meeting, if it's not a hardship, whether we have a file of, or I can just be sent those attorney bills. Or how cumbersome would that be? Or is there a way I could, if the committee agrees, I could just come in and sit at a computer and start going through things? Any feedback?
That one I can pull,
There's,
I know how to get
Oh,
pretty easily, so.
does the committee say that's okay?
I would agree to that.
Because I've asked for them in the past, but then I didn't go through the committee, and rightly or wrongly, I believe, Mark, you didn't think it was a good idea.
I think it's an administrative issue, not a committee issue, unless it's, the question is
You know.
to bring the bills before the committee, which is a different question. But if you're just asking as a resident to see those, and is that a?
No,
public-
I'm asking as a finance committee member, evaluating attorneys' fees for non-lawyers is not an administrative matter. It needs the input of other lawyers who can look at this and give an opinion. Maybe I can't, but you cannot take, Brian has no reason, if they say they spent this time on that time, he just pays the bill as he should. It's not administrative. Part of finance, who happens to be lucky to have lawyers on it, they may benefit from having members of the committee look at.
I will put it on the April agenda. It's not on this committee's meeting agenda for the board to make. I think it's a little off topic. It seems to me.
It's right on topic. We're
Well,
looking.
I know we have the issue of the overtime pay, but that was explicitly on the agenda.
Fine, put it on. Do we have an agreement that it'll be on the agenda?
Yeah, I'll put it on the April agenda. in the same way that I put on Gloria's item on the overtime pay. I have no issue with that. I'm just pointing out that it's not on the
That's good.
agenda tonight.
It's good. And also I heard from Brian, if it's agreed to by our committee, he thought it was a pretty
Just put it on
straightforward.
some future agenda item, and put it on the April agenda.
All right, fine. I'm happy.
So are we going to be able to close this issue, or do you want to have
Yeah,
a?
unless somebody
wanna have
wishes
a
to
vote?
make a motion. If there's no motion, we'll move on. I hear no motion, so we'll go on to the next item on the
Do
agenda.
we need to, so from no motion, does that mean that you will take this back to the board with a recommendation?
I don't know, Ron, you originally solicited this from Ariana. Do we? I don't even know that we need to bring it back. I probably mentioned in
Probably put
committee
it in that
matters
Yeah.
as opposed to a discussion item. It would be,
I guess my
It would be
question is, do we
pointed
need to
out
have,
to the-
should we have a motion not to proceed? Just so that we have that as, I would like that. I would make a motion not to proceed with engagement of Ehlers for tax levy referendum assistance.
Do you want to add on there and something that it's important to,
No,
no, all right, fine, I'll second that.
At this time,
At this,
yes, right, at this point, no.
could we,
Okay.
could we
So
wordsmith that a little bit?
Talk about it next month, right? I mean, they can always bring it back.
Right.
Right now, there's a,
negative motion.
I like.
see,
the
I
negative.
forgot I forgot my book. I was gonna get my Robert's Rules of Order book and.
Julie, it's the rules on- I like a negative. I don't want someone actually going on record as saying a motion in favor of this.
Well, are you recommending it as the finance committee or are you recommending it as
It's
a recommendation to the board?
a recommendation to the board not to engage Ehlers for tax levy referendum assistance at this point.
Well,
Not
aren't
to
we really
proceed with
saying,
Ehlers?
For 2027.
but wasn't this discussion that we wouldn't support a referendum?
that wasn't actually what was.
What we're
before.
discussing is whether or not to engage
Right.
Ehlers at $4,500 to provide assistance to tax levy referendum. And I don't want to do that, and I'd like it to be official.
Services at this time?
For 2027, for 2027 tax levy referendum.
Okay. The motion by Gloria, seconded by Marilyn, is to recommend to the board not to engage Ehlers for 2027 tax levy referendum services at this. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Would you agree with that?
I would take out at this time. There's no.
Fine, strike it.
need.
Oh, then I won't vote for it. I would.
Well,
vote for
that's
that.
fine.
No,
Don't
but
go-
I'm gonna explain for, it's because if we do have an emergency in July, if our numbers are bad in July,
Well, then we vote for it then.
well, that's why it's at that you're making it broadly, not doing it for
You-
2027.
You can always change motions, but if you want.
Leave it at
Agree
this
with
time.
Liz. I would, if we could just keep it at this time, I would
Yeah.
appreciate that, because I
Yeah.
would vote in favor of it, and I'm with.
Yeah.
Liz on that.
All right. Okay.
Do you want to read it back, please?
To recommend to the board not to engage Ehlers for 2027 tax levy referendum services at this time.
Thank you. Can we have a roll call?
Okay. Okay. Gloria?
Um,
It's your motion.
What comes from making a negative motion? Kim,
look at you,
I'm
shit.
not gonna help you. You're doing it.
Right. The motion is not to support a tax levy referendum. I agree with that motion.
Well, no, it's to engage Ehlers for.
It's not to engage.
Correct.
So I support that.
Okay. We got a yes from Gloria.
That's a yes, Julie.
What?
The vote is a yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
and Marilyn.
Yes,
Motion carries.
but I've learned something on negative.
Let's not do that ever again. Julie, thank you for your tutelage. She tried to say, she said, are you sure?
So let's move on to the next to last item on the agenda, future agenda items. I have two that came out of this meeting. One was the legal bills issue. We'll get that on the agenda, as well as TID closure strategy, provided that the board approves the consulting agreement with Ellers on TID planning that we supported earlier. So provided they agree, we're going to go in that direction. We will discuss the direction that should be given to Ellers in the course of that contract. So those are the two items I will add to the agenda. Are there any other future
But not
agenda?
on future, you will add it to the, let me be clear. You'll add it to the April agenda, not the future agenda items.
I will put it on in April, but the one on the TID will be conditional upon board approval. If the board rejects the contract, there's no point in putting it.
That is the TID closure. The other one is just going to be on the agenda. It's not on the list. And the list is like someday, right?
Someday, never.
Yeah,
Well-
we'll work out the exact language, but
Yes, Julie, it is on the agenda.
Yeah.
The
What
legal bill.
What about what you're doing in terms of gathering information to increase,
So,
is that
so
kind of-
Mark, may I speak to this about how I went about adding this to the agenda? So what I did is I wrote this memo. Oh, no, so I wrote the memo. And so what Marilyn and I are doing, I'm assuming that what we will do is we will write a memo and we will submit it by deadline, and then it'll be an agenda item.
are you talking about the building zone, the zoning
Correct.
fees?
Fees.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's really contingent on us doing our
Yeah,
homework.
if Brian gets in the time to put it in the packet, we'll
Right.
put it on the agenda. Zone fees.
Yeah, fees for like.
That's now 3 items.
Do you want to
Oh,
work this?
I'm sorry, there's another one. I thought I only. had one. What do I have for future agenda items? I want to make sure.
We have
To
future,
add to the list.
um,
I have the TID closure strategy, provided board hires Ellers.
Yeah, provide the board approves the contract, right?
legal bills.
The legal bills and the zoning fees.
But zoning fees are
slash building
contingent
fees, whatever.
on Marilyn and I getting that material to you.
Doing our job.
That's right.
You good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't know. you were ready.
No, I want to make sure you got that. All right. So our next meeting date is April 27th, 2026, and that will be at our regular time of 7 PM. And is there a motion?
That's the only one I have a conflict.
You have a conflict on that
night.
day.
I'm not saying you don't need to reschedule for me, but I'm just,
We like Brian here.
Well, I
Right.
think we're gonna, if like the TID closure strategy, we're gonna need Brian here.
Right, so can we talk right now about a different date?
Yes,
please?
we can. Why not? So is there, is it just a matter of, is it a date or a time issue? There's no time
It's-
for you.
yeah, no, it's that evening.
So you're,
I have a conflict
okay.
there.
So we have to find another date.
You
Is
want it
there-
after the board meeting, right?
Do you?
And it
want
would
me
have to be after the 21st.
Get to my office and look at what other meetings there's.
Well, can we do it at 8 in the morning?
I probably can't.
Pardon?
I think that's
I-
going to, I think that's going to be a potential conflict for more than just
I
Sean.
can just.
Oh, you can.
And probably for Dietmar, who's not
Right.
here and so.
We
Right.
used to
So,
designate personnel meetings at
Um,
7 in the morning.
Can we, so Julie, you asked if you could run upstairs and look at your schedule.
Well,
No, she said a
I would send out a doodle, I could send out a doodle.
Yes, do the doodle poll,
And
please.
then that'll give some.
Yeah, that would give DBAR
At least
and
we'll know
Kate
that
a
you
chance
and
to
Brian are
weigh in.
both available.
Let's do that.
So our next
Okay.
regular meeting date is now to be determined, doodle poll to be sent.
That's right. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Seconded.
Excellent. All those in favor, say aye, raise your hand, done.
Sounds.
Thank you. I'm sorry it was such a long meeting, 9:20.
Oh, thank God.
8:20, right, it still hasn't, still a long meeting,
Much better.
right,
A
though.
single clock in this village hall is appropriate.